Imagine coming home to find your whole life unraveled in a single conversation. How do you recover when your own husband confronts you with a truth you've been hiding for years? What would you do if your darkest secrets came crashing down in the worst way possible? Maggie had always been a dreamer, craving freedom and excitement that her small-town upbringing and her parents' expectations just couldn't provide. They had envisioned her leading a more traditional life, finish school, get married, and settle down nearby, but Maggie yearned for adventure and a career that fulfilled her. In high school, she crossed paths with Sam, a charming, carefree guy who shared her rebellious streak. After graduation, they dove into a whirlwind romance, spending the summer exploring the countryside and savoring every passionate moment they could. One night, they found themselves lying under the stars on a quilt spread out in his uncle's barn. By fall, their lives began to head in different directions. Sam went off to pursue a degree in agribusiness at a state university, while Maggie moved 3 states over to attend college on an accounting scholarship. Though they briefly reunited during the summer after their first year, Maggie's internships kept her too busy to maintain the connection, and eventually, she returned home to take a job at a local bank. As time passed, their lives naturally drifted apart. Sam eventually sold off his family's farms and invested in retail, tripling the income the farms might have brought in. Maggie, who had been assigned as his bank coordinator, reconnected with him over a few work lunches. Those lunches gradually turned into dinners, and before long, they were back together. 18 months later, they got married in a simple ceremony at a country church. After the honeymoon, Sam gave Maggie some seed money to launch her own business, with his stores as her first clients. To ensure financial independence, they signed a post-nuptial agreement, guaranteeing that Sam wouldn't have a claim on her business profits. Maggie's business thrived, expanding into 8 offices across 2 states, while Sam's retail chain grew to 4 stores. They achieved financial success but remained grounded in their local community. Their 4-bedroom home stayed childless after complications during their daughter Lily's birth left Maggie unable to have more children. Lily, now a college graduate, had become the center of their lives. Maggie maintained a tradition of annual shopping trips with her mother and daughter. One Thursday evening, Maggie came home to find the takeout still sitting untouched and Sam quietly sitting on the patio, staring at the sunset. She grabbed some plates and joined him, noticing how he avoided her usual kiss. "How'd your day go?" she asked carefully. Without looking at her, he responded, "Pretty uneventful this morning, but I had an interesting lunch." Assuming he had just run into someone annoying, Maggie smiled. "Oh. Was it a pretty young thing or some cranky old man?" Sam, still calm, answered, "Actually, she was quite attractive, Amanda Pearson." A chill ran down Maggie's spine. "And what did you two talk about?" she asked, her voice tense. "Sex," he replied, bluntly. Maggie's heart started to race. Why would a 24-year-old woman talk to you about sex? She and Bobby were planning to have an open marriage. "She wanted me to be her first, since you were supposed to be his," Sam said. "She thought I'd be gentle with her." By the end of the conversation, she was pissed. "You should probably warn Bobby, a lawsuit's coming. Be ready. This state still allows alienation of affection claims. Now, look me in the eye and tell me none of it's true. If even a shred of it is, we're done." Stunned, Maggie struggled to form a response. After a long silence, Sam turned away. "I figured," he said, standing up. "I'm leaving. I'll be staying at the farm. Don't try to contact me. We'll talk when I'm ready." He drove away, leaving Maggie standing there, frozen in place, the plates still untouched. As night crept in, she eventually got up, poured herself a stiff drink, and whispered, "Good night, Sam," before breaking down into tears. She drank herself into oblivion and eventually passed out. The next morning, it was her housekeeper who woke her. "Are you all right?" the housekeeper asked, eyeing the untouched takeout and the half-empty bottle of vodka. Maggie offered a weak smile. Sorry, Patty. Things got a little out of hand last night. Patty frowned. I can't believe Sam just left you like this. Maggie shook her head. Sam wasn't here. I just had a lot going on in my head. Patty glanced at the plates and glasses but didn't say anything more. After calling her assistant to rearrange her appointments for the day, Maggie took a long, hot shower, reflecting on how everything had spiraled out of control. With Sam's seed money, she had opened her first office, and before long, his business became one of her biggest clients. In just 12 years, she had expanded to 8 offices, but she had always limited growth so she wouldn't have to be away from home too much. Living in a dry county, socializing over drinks was a rarity, a far cry from her wild college days. It had been over 10 weeks since she and Sam had been intimate, first due to his illness, then their busy travel and work schedules. Normally, their sex life was active, anywhere from 2 to 5 times a week, sometimes in exciting spots like the loft in their barn. But this long dry spell had left Maggie feeling restless. During a business trip to a new office in a bigger city, she treated herself to a night out, which ultimately led to a brief fling with a dancer, something she regretted the very next morning. Fearing that Sam might find out, she threw herself back into her marriage, working hard to bury her guilt. Yet, the thrill of the affair stuck with her. The next time she traveled, she found herself back at the same club with the same dancer. That fling went on for 3 months, with Maggie lavishing him with gifts. When it finally ended, she found herself slipping into another affair, even though she had sworn she'd stop. That's when Bobby Tate, her new assistant, entered the picture. What began as innocent flirtation quickly escalated into something more. To Maggie, Bobby was nothing more than a temporary distraction, never a true match for Sam. But when Bobby's wife, Amanda, discovered the affair, it set off the chain of events that turned Maggie's world upside down. Meanwhile, at the farm, Sam stood on the ridge, looking out at the old farmhouse. Years ago, he had renovated the place, adding in all kinds of modern upgrades, but Maggie had been too consumed with her business to really care. It was just another example of their relationship. Maggie was always focused on whatever directly involved her. They had originally planned to live on the farm, but instead decided to build a new house when they started talking about having a family. After the complications with Lily's birth, Maggie had dismissed the idea of adoption, and Sam had let it go. Lily became the center of his world, while Maggie lost herself in her work. To stay close to his daughter, Sam built a daycare center right next to his store, which soon became known for shaping high-achieving kids. Other stores started adopting the same model, but for Sam, it wasn't just a charitable act, it was his way of keeping Lily close and happy. As Sam unpacked groceries at the farm, he couldn't help but think about all of this, wondering how they had ended up here. Even though he didn't drink, he'd brought along a 12-pack, brewed a pot of coffee, and sat out on the porch where he and Maggie had shared so many memories. As he looked back on their marriage, he wondered if there had ever been any clear warning signs. He thought about her vague smile, those little moments of affection that now felt so shallow. Had she been thinking of her other lovers all along? His thoughts were interrupted by the buzzing of his phone. At first, he ignored it, but then curiosity got the best of him, and he glanced at the number. Hello. Sam answered the phone. The sound of sobs filled the other end before a shaky voice finally spoke. Amanda? He asked, his voice shifting to a calm but firm tone. Who hit you? My husband, she cried. I told him about our lunch and that I was leaving him. He lost it and punched me. What do I do? Are you out of the house now? Sam asked, keeping his voice steady. Yes, she sobbed. Go straight to the hospital. I'll meet you there. Don't wait, if you want my help, you need to move fast. He hung up and immediately dialed the sheriff's department. When Sam arrived at the hospital, Amanda rushed to him, her face swollen and bruised. He waited for 40 minutes before the deputy came back with an update. Her cheekbones broken. She says she wants to speak to you before pressing charges, the deputy informed him. What happened, Sam? The deputy asked. Sam gave a quick explanation. We had lunch. She needed advice. Her husband's been pushing her into swinging, and I guess he didn't like what I had to say. The deputy, Carla Jenkins, smirked. Swingers around here. You think you know folks, and then something like this pops up. Sam's expression tightened. I need to talk to her, he said. In the hospital room, Amanda looked pale and heavily sedated. What should I do? She asked, her voice weak. First things first, press charges. If you don't, there's nothing I can do to help you, Sam urged. Has he hit you before? She hesitated before nodding. He slapped me a couple of times. Carla, did you catch that? Sam asked, glancing at the deputy. Carla nodded. I can't do anything unless she gives a statement and agrees to press charges. Turning back to Amanda, Sam spoke gently but firmly. You've got to be honest. Your safety's the priority here. He gave her a reassuring nod before leaving so she could make her statement. About 45 minutes later, Carla returned. For now, it's being logged as a domestic disturbance. She'll stay here tonight, and after that, we'll either find her a shelter or figure something else out. Sam checked in on Amanda one last time, found her fast asleep, and then headed home, drained. The next morning, he woke up disoriented, taking a moment to remember where he was. After a quick shower, he called his assistant and took the day off. As he replayed the events of the previous day in his mind, he grimaced. So, my wife's a serial cheater, her lover wants an open marriage, his wife refuses, he hits her, now she's in the hospital, and my wife has no idea about any of this. While grabbing breakfast, Sam ran into Officer Jenkins, who was just finishing her shift. She greeted him with a kiss on the cheek, causing him to blush. Sitting down beside him, she ordered steak and eggs and gave him an update on the situation. We arrested him. He wasn't exactly cooperative, cussed us out and went off about Amanda, Maggie, and you. He's been processed, but you can bet his dad's lawyers will get involved soon enough. Amanda's going to need somewhere to stay. Can you help with that? I can't do it directly, but come by my office, Sam said, catching his assistant off guard. Sam opened the safe, pulled out $3,000 in cash, and handed it to Carla. Get her an apartment, cover her expenses for the month, and don't mention where the money came from. Carla followed his instructions, and 18 months later, Sam even walked her down the aisle at her wedding, having paid for everything. In the meantime, Amanda was safe, and Sam left town to check on his furthest store. Back at home, Maggie waited, hoping for some word from Sam. After 2 weeks of silence, she tried calling and emailing him, but nothing. Feeling completely lost, she gained weight and decided to head back to the gym. One day, a former fling, now a trainer, pulled her aside, and Maggie ended up confessing everything to him. What did you think would happen? He asked bluntly. You weren't exactly being discreet. So why are you so eager to get him back? Because I love him, she pleaded. Then get it together. Work out, and I'll call Gabe to fix your hair. You've got some grays showing. She managed a small smile. Dinner tonight? Not a chance. I'm married now. Besides, your husband's not a guy I'd want to cross. As Maggie worked out, she realized her trainer was right, she needed to warn her past lovers. Meanwhile, Sam sat on the porch of his farmhouse, listening to the gossip circulating about him. Sheriff Andy stopped by for some coffee, and after a little small talk, he cut to the chase. People are talking. Maggie looks terrible. This is about Amanda Tate and her husband, right? Andy asked. Yeah, he's in jail, and Amanda's already filed for divorce, Sam confirmed. So what's the real story here? Sam gave him the rundown but left out a few key details. Amanda opened my eyes to a lot of things, so yeah, I'm helping her with the divorce. We've never been more than friends. As Andy drove away, he reflected on how he never would have imagined Maggie cheating. This news would devastate Lily, who had always been close to Sam. Andy could only hope this wouldn't blow up into a full-blown scandal. Maggie was shocked when she finally received an email from Sam, fearing she might never hear from him again. His message was brief and blunt. While she responded with a long, heartfelt email, pouring out her love and begging to meet, his reply was just a single word: why? This back and forth continued until Sam eventually agreed to meet her, on one condition. She had to give him a real answer to his question. After several attempts and some guidance from her therapist, she sent him her final response. Sam, this is the hardest thing I've ever had to write. I have no excuse for what I did. I've been seeing a counselor, but in the end, I did it because I could. I never flaunted it because I knew how deeply it would hurt you. You could destroy me, but you won't because you're a good man. Despite everything, I never stopped loving you, not even during my worst mistakes. All I wanted was to come back home to you. I would do anything to fix this. Please don't ask me for details, it won't change anything. I love you, Sam. Always, Maggie. Sam read her letter 4 times, his anger growing with each pass. She cheated because she could, yet she still claimed she loved him. Her comment about whether it was one affair or 100 confirmed there had been many. That was all the confirmation he needed. Without saying a word, Sam left town and traveled to one of the cities where Maggie had an office. Through his lawyer, he hired 2 top-tier private investigation firms in the area. He did the same in each city where she had a business, paying a premium and offering bonuses for quick, thorough results. I want everything, Sam instructed. If you even suspect someone had an affair with my wife, I want you to dig deep. Afterward, the firm owners discussed his request. What's he really trying to figure out? One of them asked. He's a man in pain, trying to make sense of why she betrayed him, the other replied. I did some research. No history of violence. People respect him, except for those who've crossed him. He's known for his kindness. They agreed to move forward with the investigation but decided to keep an eye out for any signs of irrational behavior. Meanwhile, Bobby Tate sat in his jail cell, stunned by how quickly his world had crumbled. What had started as some harmless flirting with Maggie had snowballed into a full-blown affair. Bobby had seen the affair as a golden opportunity, a way to step into her husband's shoes and gain access to her wealth, thinking it might even earn his father's approval. Maggie had even floated the idea of making him her assistant to lighten her workload, and Bobby saw it as his ticket to power and control. But things went south fast when his wife, Amanda, started getting suspicious. She eventually uncovered their emails, and Bobby tried to spin it, claiming he was only going along with it for the sake of their mutual benefit. Over time, he convinced her to entertain the idea of finding a wealthy man who could support them, saying it would help them start their own business. To his surprise, Amanda set her sights on Sam Barton. But when Amanda confronted Sam, everything unraveled. She confessed to everything, including Maggie's plan to take Bobby on a trip that very night. After telling Bobby about her conversation with Sam and her decision to leave him, things took a turn. They had a heated argument, and with Bobby drinking heavily, his world falling apart, he lashed out in desperation, hitting her in a futile attempt to shut her up. After she left, Bobby was left to drown in his despair, wondering how he could ever make things right again. Maybe I could ask Sam for hush money, Bobby thought to himself. A few hours later, loud banging at his door startled him awake. Damn it, Amanda, leave me alone before I. He trailed off when he opened the door and saw 2 officers standing there. Robert Tate, one of the officers asked. Yeah, what do you want? It's the middle of the night. Before he could say another word, they shoved him to the ground and slapped handcuffs on his wrists. Robert Tate, you're under arrest for the assault of Amanda Tate, the female officer stated. But it was just a slap. Bobby shouted as they pulled him to his feet. Barton put her up to this, didn't he? Mr. Tate, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you, the officer warned, and Bobby fell silent. The processing was a blur, and his anger grew when he found out he wouldn't be eligible for bail for 48 hours due to domestic violence laws. The next morning, swallowing his pride, Bobby called his father. His dad laughed at him but eventually agreed to help, on the condition that Bobby pay him back. By the time Bobby was released, Amanda had already packed her things and vanished. Her lawyer was waiting with divorce papers in hand. Amanda had taken medical leave, and no one at her workplace would give Bobby any information. His lawyer warned him that unless Amanda dropped the charges, jail time was a very real possibility. A few days later, Bobby spotted Sam at a diner, surrounded by waitresses doting on him. Trying to regain some confidence, Bobby flagged down his own waitress. "So, what do I have to do to get that kind of service?" he asked, casually resting his hand on her arm. She quickly pulled away, glaring at him. "For starters, don't hit your wife," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear, causing the diner to erupt in laughter. Before Bobby could say anything back, the owner walked over. "Enjoying your burger, Bobby?" she asked, still smiling. "Yeah, it's great, thanks," he said, feeling a little relieved at the friendly tone. "Good to hear," she replied. "Because it's the last meal you'll ever have here. You're banned from this place for as long as I own it." More laughter filled the diner. Fuming, Bobby noticed Sam watching him, a smug grin plastered across his face. Rage bubbled up inside Bobby, but before he could react, two female officers entered, kissed Sam on the cheek, and joined in the laughter. As Sam left, he paid for their meals and left a generous tip. Out of spite, Bobby finished his meal slowly and walked out without leaving a tip. When he stepped outside, he found a yellow boot clamped to his car and a $138 parking ticket for parking too close to a fire hydrant. Furious, he trudged back to the office. Surprisingly, he hadn't been fired yet, but the whispers had started, and his coworkers were keeping their distance. True to form, Bobby blamed everyone but himself. It didn't take long for him to hatch a new plan: target Faith, Sam's daughter. She had flirted with him a bit during her college breaks, and if he could win her over, it would be the ultimate revenge. Faith had turned down plenty of suitors, focusing instead on growing her veterinary practice. When the town's older vet had to retire due to health issues, Faith took over, offering mobile services to local farms. Her business thrived, but she resisted expanding, preferring to stay hands-on. Sam and Maggie were both proud of her, though Sam would often drop hints about wanting grandchildren. Faith always reassured him, saying she'd let him know when the time was right. Sometimes, she and her single friends would go out for a night of fun, often with Carla and Vicky, the two local officers, keeping an eye on them. Once, Carla caught a guy trying to slip something into Faith's drink, arrested him on the spot, and Sam's influence ensured the man took a plea deal and served time. After being attacked in prison, the guy left town as soon as he was released. One day, Bobby showed up at Faith's clinic with a cat, surprising her with how well the animal seemed to respond to him. "What's her name?" Faith asked. "Lady Grey," Bobby said, blushing a little. "She's got that regal look, don't you think?" Faith filled out the paperwork, reminding him to make sure the cat had plenty of food, water, and regular checkups. Bobby tried to strike up some small talk, but Faith cut him off, explaining that her schedule was packed. Frustrated, he left, but soon came up with an idea: he'd let Lady Grey loose near the clinic, hoping the cat would find her way back and give him an excuse to come in again. For a moment, he felt a pang of guilt but quickly brushed it aside. Sure enough, Faith found Lady Grey wandering nearby and brought her back into the clinic. Later, Faith called her mother. "We're having dinner tomorrow at China House at 7 sharp, she said firmly. "We need to talk. If you dodge my questions, we're done." If you don't show up, that'll say everything I need to know." She hung up without waiting for a response. That evening, Faith took Lady Grey home, and by morning, the cat had already made herself comfortable at the clinic, roaming around freely and even sharing some of Faith's lunch. When Bobby called about picking up the cat, Faith told him he could come by, but she had her assistant, Nancy, stay close by, sensing something was off. Bobby, who had recently been high, arrived at the clinic in a daze. He'd been helping an old college buddy launder money through shell companies and offshore accounts, unaware that his friend was involved in drug trafficking. Bobby had been taking pills here and there, enjoying the focus they gave him, but his life was slowly unraveling. While he hadn't been fired yet, it was clear that he and Maggie couldn't continue working together. He had been transferred to a different location that Maggie rarely visited, but she had tried to smooth things over by promoting him to office manager with a raise. "I'm doing what I can for both of us, Bobby. I can't keep in contact if I have any hope of reconciling with Sam. We both made mistakes. And if you're thinking of taking any legal action, you might want to reconsider. Amanda gave Charlie every email we exchanged. I could easily spin this as a midlife crisis where you seduced me for money. We'd all lose, but you'd lose the most." Reluctantly, Bobby accepted the promotion with the promise of a glowing recommendation and a severance package whenever he eventually moved on. Even though he felt trapped, he convinced himself that everything was still working out as planned. In his mind, he'd eventually win Faith over, imagining her submitting to his every demand. Needing a confidence boost, he popped a few pills before heading to the clinic. Faith greeted him, holding Lady Grey in her arms, while Nancy stood nearby, keeping an eye on the situation. "Looks like Lady Grey's become your new best friend," Bobby said with a forced smile, trying to sound charming. "You've always been so easy to get along with." Nancy giggled awkwardly, but Faith wasn't swayed. She gave him a cold smile. "Let's get one thing straight, Bobby. I've always thought you were full of yourself, even back when we were 18. Now that I know what you and my mother had planned, you disgust me. Whatever it is you're after, you're not getting it here. You can either take your cat and leave, or better yet, leave her with me and I'll make sure she finds a good home." Bobby was stunned. No woman had ever rejected him so bluntly before. "Come on, Faith. Why the hostility? We'd be perfect together, king and queen of this town." Faith didn't miss a beat. "Oh, really? I bring beauty, money, and status to the table, and you, what? A broke loser on probation? Sounds like a winning future." Bobby was, in fact, on probation for assaulting Amanda, but thanks to a decent lawyer and his previously clean record, he only had to do community service and attend anger management, which he wasn't taking seriously. He hadn't even started his community service yet but thought maybe Faith would let him do it at the clinic. Seething with anger, he grabbed her arm. Faith stared at him, unfazed, and said, "Let go and leave. That's your only warning." In a sudden fit of rage, Bobby slapped her hard, causing Lady Grey to fall from Faith's arms. The cat, startled, scratched Bobby as he threw her violently against the wall, where she crumpled to the floor, her leg twisted unnaturally. Faith, furious, retaliated by punching Bobby, but he grabbed her, dragging her toward the door. "You stupid witch. Now I'll have to teach you a real lesson," he shouted. Faith screamed and managed to knee him in the groin, but Bobby struck her in the face, breaking her nose and knocking her unconscious. Nancy, who had been watching the entire time, immediately called for help. As soon as Bobby grabbed Faith, Nancy rushed forward and shot a tranquilizer dart into his back. Bobby howled in fury, turned on Nancy, and knocked her out with a punch before dragging Faith toward his car. Just as he reached the parking lot, the first police cruiser pulled up. "Get on the ground, now," Officer Wells commanded, his gun drawn and steady. Bobby tightened his grip around Faith's neck. "Back off, or I'll crush her windpipe," he growled. Just then, Carla Martinez arrived, taser in hand. "Jimmy, if he so much as twitches, drop him," she ordered. Bobby snarled as Jimmy stepped forward, trying to keep his attention. Smirking, Jimmy called out, "You're such an idiot, Bobby. Amanda's with me now. She wanted a real man." Enraged, Bobby turned to face Jimmy, and in that split second, the tranquilizer finally kicked in. He loosened his grip on Faith, and as she fell to the ground, Carla hit Bobby with the taser, making sure he was fully incapacitated. Within minutes, 3 ambulances pulled up, one for Faith, one for Nancy, and one for Bobby, who was cuffed to the gurney. Faith was left with a broken nose, a concussion, and bruises. Nancy, also concussed, had to stay in the hospital overnight. Bobby, meanwhile, tested positive for drugs, and a search of his house turned up more pills. He was hit with charges for drug possession, violating probation, assault, aggravated assault, attempted sexual assault, and animal cruelty. His bail was set so high that even his father refused to help him out. Meanwhile, Rose had been waiting for hours at the restaurant, convinced that Faith had stood her up. It wasn't until she finally checked her phone that she saw the messages, including one from Sam. "Rose, pick up. Faith's in the hospital. Your boy Bobby attacked her." He didn't get far, the cop stopped him. "When you're ready, get over here." Heart pounding, Rose rushed to the hospital, and when she arrived, she was devastated to see her daughter's bruised and swollen face. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she leaned over Faith, who slowly stirred awake. They cried together, Faith's voice weak as she whispered, "Sorry I missed dinner, Mom." Choking back her own tears, Rose replied, "It's okay, baby. I'm so sorry. This is all my fault." Faith tried to reassure her, "No, Mom, it's not," though they both knew the truth, that Bobby's actions had stemmed from everything connected to Rose. They talked for a few minutes before Faith drifted back to sleep. Rose sensed someone nearby and turned to see Sam standing in the doorway. He looked worn out, but his expression was tight with anger. "Please, Sam, we need to talk," Rose begged. Sam gently pulled his hands away from her grasp and said, "We will, but I need 2 more weeks. I'll send you an email. For now, stay with Faith. I'll be back in the morning." Confused and hurt by his need for more time, Rose could only nod as Sam walked out without another word. When Bobby finally woke up, he was groggy and disoriented, his hands cuffed to the hospital bed. As the memories of what happened came flooding back, fear gripped him. Looking up, he saw Sam Barton sitting calmly beside him, his eyes cold and unrelenting. "Good morning, Bobby," Sam said softly, his voice eerily calm. "Looks like the DA's pushing for 8 to 10 years. He leaned over, his tone dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You idiot. First you mess with my wife, and now my daughter. Did you actually think you'd get away with any of this?" Bobby opened his mouth to scream, but Sam quickly covered it with a towel. "In prison, you'll learn what it really means to be broken. I'll make sure of that. And when you finally get out, everyone will know exactly what kind of man you are." With that, Sam gripped Bobby's groin hard enough to make him pass out from the pain. Feeling nothing but satisfaction, Sam tossed the towel aside, thanked the nurse on his way out, and said casually, "He's still out. Keep him in your prayers." The nurse smiled, thinking Sam was some kind of saint. Later, when Faith woke up again, she knew immediately that she was in the hospital, and seeing her mother sitting quietly by her bedside, the memories of the attack hit her all at once. Rose stirred and noticed Faith watching her, tears welling up in both their eyes. It was the first real conversation they'd had in years, and it ran deeper than either of them had expected. "I guess I'm more like Dad than I thought," Faith said quietly. "But why, Mom?" Rose let out a deep sigh. "I've asked myself that question 1,000 times. The therapists say it's about power, that I thought I could have it all." Faith's frustration boiled over. "So, if you hadn't been caught, you'd still be cheating?" Rose's face paled, clearly horrified. "No. I didn't want a divorce, and I still don't. I want to fix things. Faith shook her head, exasperated. Mom, listen to yourself. Just let it go. You got caught, and Dad's not going to forgive you. Move on and be honest about what you really want. Their conversation was interrupted when the doctor arrived, and after Rose left, Charlie came into the room, doing his best to force a smile. You just missed Mom, Faith said, watching his face carefully. I know, Charlie replied, his voice even. Are you going to talk to her? Faith asked, hoping for a sign of resolution. Yes. Soon. When I'm ready, he answered, his tone calm but guarded. Faith hesitated, then spoke softly, please don't be too hard on her. Let her go, let her find some happiness. Charlie didn't respond the way Faith had hoped. Instead, there was a flicker of something dark in his eyes, something unsettling. It reminded her of a memory she had buried deep. She had been just 7 years old and had seen that same look before. The image of Juan's father, a man who'd struggled with alcohol after starting work at the company, crept into her mind. One day, during playtime, she'd sneaked away to ask her dad if her friends could come over. She'd followed him and Juan behind one of the buildings near the fertilizer storage. What she saw was a shock. Juan was unconscious, and her father was rubbing his bruised knuckles. Charlie had slapped Juan awake and whispered something in his ear. Faith had quietly slipped away, never telling a soul. Later, when her mom noticed Charlie's black eye and scraped cheek, he had brushed it off, saying it happened while moving fertilizer bags. Rose had scolded him for not letting the workers handle it. Juan had missed daycare for almost a week, and when he returned, he told Faith that his father had been deported. It wasn't until later that she learned her family had also faced deportation, and that it was Charlie who had stepped in, sponsoring them and securing their green cards. He even hired Juan's mother to teach Spanish at the daycare. After Charlie's visit, Faith found herself reflecting on her childhood. Most of her happiest memories involved her dad, while her mother, Rose, had grown more distant over the years. When Faith opened her third office, Rose would rush home, give a quick kiss, and disappear into her own space, barely acknowledging Faith's attempts to share her day. It was Charlie who had become the primary caregiver, consulting with the daycare staff, doctors, and even a child psychologist to make sure Faith had everything she needed, something Faith didn't fully appreciate until she was older. He was the one who taught her how to fish, shoot, and hunt, molding her into a strong, confident woman who valued loyalty and fairness. Rose, despite her standing in the community, never really understood that part of Faith's life. For Faith, money didn't hold the same importance. Charlie's influence had always kept her grounded, and while she allowed herself a few indulgences here and there, she always came back to what mattered most. After vet school, Charlie had surprised her with the deed to a 26-acre property, telling her it was enough space for a clinic, a barn, paddocks, and kennels. He provided the funds, but left the rest up to her. Faith had been deeply moved by the gesture. Charlie had also given her a warning, beware of leeches and wolves, he had said, reminding her that she'd inherit everything when he passed. The clinic ended up costing $800,000 but was paid off quickly. Faith had relied on lawyers for the setup, consulting Charlie throughout the process. Within 10 months, the clinic was turning a profit, and by the end of the first year, she had expanded her staff. Though she had been tempted to open another clinic, she chose instead to focus on her future family, knowing that any partner would need to be strong enough to handle her independent nature. So far, none of the men she dated had lived up to her standards. Meanwhile, 2 private investigators had just wrapped up 10 weeks of work, digging into Rose's affairs. They had uncovered 5 different lovers over a span of 6 years. He's going to lose it, one of the investigators remarked. Most likely, the other agreed. But that's what he paid us for. They met with Charlie, handed over the files, and left, prepared for whatever might happen next. Back at the farm, Charlie calmly sifted through the reports until he reached the details about Rose's second-to-last lover. At that moment, he lost control, hurling his coffee cup against the wall. After a few minutes, he composed himself, his face cold and determined. At the conference table, Rose gripped the edges tightly, feeling her chances slipping away, but still holding on to a sliver of hope. The lawyers were waiting outside. Charlie had insisted they handle this privately. She stood up, intending to embrace him, but he quickly stepped back, a clear sign things weren't going her way. Still, she tried to keep it cordial. "Hi, Charlie. How are you?" "As well as can be expected," he replied flatly. "You really went all out today. I appreciate the effort." "I dressed to please you," Rose said, trying to sound upbeat. "Thanks for the effort," Charlie said, setting a thick packet down on the table in front of her. Rose's heart sank at the sight of it. "I asked you how long this had been going on and how many there were," Charlie began, lifting a slim folder. "This is what you gave me." He then pointed to the much thicker file he had just set down. "And this is what my investigators found. Care to compare?" Feeling the weight of the moment, Rose swayed slightly. "No need. You knew I wasn't telling the truth," she admitted. Charlie continued, ignoring her. "Bob Walton. Married. 4 kids. Runs an insurance agency. You switched to his coverage right after your first meeting." He pressed play on a recording of Walton saying, "I slept with her because she was older and still attractive, but without the business aspect, I wouldn't have bothered." Rose winced as Charlie carried on. "I told him I'd open an office next to his if he didn't come clean to his wife." He broke down. It was pathetic. "They're separated now. He's living out of his office." Charlie went on to list more names. "Another guy, I had him fired and moved 400 miles away. I hope you use protection. I got tested 2 months ago, just in case. Some things take time to show." Rose said nothing, though she had been getting screened regularly. She realized Charlie hadn't uncovered one brief, drunken affair, but it hardly mattered now. Charlie continued, "Your trainer. I liked him, at least he didn't lie." He played another recording of the trainer admitting, "She made the first move. I'm not proud of it, but I'm telling my wife the truth." Charlie paused the recording. He was right. Revenge didn't satisfy me. It's over. He sighed deeply. "You've been at this for so long, Rose. I'll never trust you again." He slid a thick packet across the table. "Jerry has the paperwork ready. You keep your business. I keep mine. It's all laid out in the prenup. You get the house, I keep the farm. Everything else goes to Faith." Rose felt her stomach drop. Charlie stood up, looking her in the eye for what seemed like the last time. "We're done. I can't look at a sunset without thinking about that night. Anything you want to say?" Trembling, Rose whispered, "I'm so sorry, Charlie. I don't know why I did this. I still want a life with you, but I know it's over. I won't contest the divorce. But if, in 2 years, you're still single, maybe you'll think about giving me another chance." "No, Rose," Charlie said coldly. "I won't make any promises, but I'll think about it if the time comes. Goodbye." And with that, he walked out, leaving her in tears. The next day, Rose signed the papers and called Faith, who stayed with her for a week. Though Faith tried to comfort her, she knew the damage to Charlie ran too deep. The fairy tale had ended, and life had to move on. Rose threw herself into her business, doubling the number of offices in just 6 years. She dated younger men for the fun of it and eventually married a man almost 70, known for his performance issues but open to letting her have discreet affairs. Faith continued to check in on her father, but her own life was getting busier. She had met a veterinary supply salesman, a tall, strong, and kind man. One day, while she was struggling to control a restless stallion, the man stepped in, grabbing the halter and calming the horse with ease. "Thanks, Faith said, extending her hand. Charlie, he said, shaking her hand. But you'd have handled it if the halter hadn't snapped. Nice to meet you, she replied with a smile. I've still got a lot of rounds to finish. He let go of her hand reluctantly. Later, Faith noticed her assistant flirting with him. Here she is, the assistant said, smiling at Faith. Faith, meet Charlie. He's the guy who supplies our materials. We've met, he said with a grin. How about lunch? I'm new in town and don't know the good spots yet. To her own surprise, Faith agreed. Give me a few minutes. As they walked to his truck, she noticed it was identical to hers. I prefer trucks, he explained. More space for samples and paperwork. At the diner, they parked side by side next to a similar truck. She took his hand as they walked inside. They approached a table where an older man sat with a young, pregnant woman. The woman paused mid-conversation, looking up at them. Hey, Carla, just one more month to go, Faith greeted the young, pregnant woman, then turned toward the man sitting across from her. Dad, this is Charlie. He supplies our materials. She shot a playful glance at Charlie. Meet my dad, your future father-in-law. Everyone looked stunned, except for Faith, who smirked and quickly added, just kidding. This is my dad, and this is just a lunch date. From that moment on, Faith and Charlie stayed in constant contact, texting and talking regularly. His next visit led to lunch, then dinner, and eventually a long, passionate make-out session in his truck. When Charlie came back for another visit, Faith cleared her entire weekend to spend time with him. The two of them spent their days filled with passion, making love all throughout her house. Late on Saturday night, they decided to head to the family farm. Charlie, being a light sleeper, heard the familiar sound of Faith's truck pulling up. He started toward the barn to check, but as soon as he heard giggles coming from the loft, he smiled to himself and went back to bed. By morning, the only sign of their visit was the open hay doors. As news spread that Charlie was now single, the offers from women started pouring in, but he politely turned them all down. He dated casually when traveling, but nothing serious ever came of it. Then, about 10 months before his 60th birthday, his gate buzzer went off, and with a bit of irritation, he answered. Who is it? It's your cousin Cindy. Open the gate. My car's about to die any second. I don't remember a cousin Cindy. Not by blood, by marriage. I'm Devin's wife, and I've got the kids with me. Are you going to let us in or what? Charlie hesitated for a moment. Devin had tried to cheat him once, but since there were kids involved, he pressed the button to open the gate. An old, sputtering minivan pulled in, and 3 kids spilled out, rushing toward the house, desperate for the bathroom. A 13-year-old girl, who bore an uncanny resemblance to Faith at that age, followed next. Cindy got out last, looking worn down and scared, but determined. I'm at the end of my rope, Charlie, she said, her voice shaky. Devin took off with the good car, drained our accounts, and disappeared. I pawned my wedding rings just to buy gas, but I didn't realize the car would burn through so much. It took everything I had just to get here. As one of the younger kids started fussing, the 13-year-old girl asked Charlie if they had any food for the baby. Shocked to learn they hadn't eaten since yesterday's lunch, he led them all into the kitchen. I've got some cheese and crackers. Give that to the kids, and get the baby some cereal, it'll help fill her up. Your mom and I will take care of dinner. Charlie had planned to smoke a pork loin that evening but decided to throw it on the grill instead. He found a dozen ears of corn that a neighbor had dropped off and added those to the grill as well. Cindy and Faith made tea and lemonade, while Faith microwaved some potatoes. In less than 45 minutes, dinner was ready, and the kids eagerly dug in. As they ate, Charlie simmered with anger at Devin for abandoning his family in such a state. After dinner, he went out to the barn and made a call to John Goff, the new county sheriff and a retired SBI agent. About 10 months earlier, just before the upcoming election, Charlie had approached Goff with a straightforward question. "Are you planning on running again?" "I want to," Goff replied, "but I'm not sure I have enough support." Charlie looked him in the eye. "Are you a good man? Will you uphold the law and not betray a friend?" "I am," Goff answered confidently. "I don't want you to be my man," Charlie said. "I want you to be the county's man. Meet with these campaign planners and get back to me." After meeting with the planners, Goff returned, saying, "This is going to take a lot of money." "It's covered," they replied. "Different groups have already made substantial contributions." "Why's Charlie involved in this?" Goff asked, his curiosity piqued. "I don't want to be anyone's puppet." "He just wants you as sheriff," they said simply. Soon, billboards started popping up, which didn't go unnoticed by Sheriff Andy. In the last election, Charlie's support had been instrumental in his victory, but this time, Charlie was noticeably quiet. As the race grew tighter, Andy paid a visit to Charlie at the farm. He saw kids playing outside and a young woman serving tea. "She's a bit young for you, don't you think?" Andy joked as he approached Charlie. "That's Devon's wife," Charlie replied coldly. "I'm just helping them out. Now, what do you need?" "Goff's gaining ground fast," Andy said, his tone shifting to one of concern. "I could use your support, maybe even some financial help. Those ads aren't cheap." Charlie remained calm as he responded, "Save your money, Andy. Retire when your term ends. You won't be holding another office in this county." Andy's face drained of color. "What? Why would you do this? We've been friends for years." Charlie looked at him, the weight of betrayal in his eyes. One of Charlie's investigators had uncovered that Rose had been a frequent guest at luxury hotels, and one weekend, Andy had been seen with her. Charlie had turned off the recording, but the damage was already done. "You were my best friend, Andy. But you betrayed me. We're done. From now on, only talk to me when it's official business. And think carefully about how you're going to handle the fallout when this gets out. Now, leave." Andy left, visibly shaken. Cindy came outside carrying a pitcher of tea. "Was the sheriff crying?" she asked, curious. "Probably just some dust," Charlie replied nonchalantly as the youngest child climbed up onto his lap. "Don't get too attached to us, Charlie," Cindy said quietly. "We'll be leaving soon." "You keep saying that," he smiled, "but you're still here. What are you doing on a housekeeping salary? I know you registered the kids for school using my address." Her temper flared. "If I had the money, we'd be gone. You've trapped us here, just like Devon did." The accusation struck a nerve. Charlie stood up, went inside, and returned with a $5,000 check. "On your way to the bank, stop by the Jeep dealership. Take whatever they offer, it's covered. Use this to get settled. You'll start at the store on Monday. It's not much, but enough to get by, and the kids will have free daycare. Can you be out by Friday?" Cindy hadn't expected this. She thought pushing his buttons would make him more attached, not drive him away. As she considered what to say, she noticed her daughter, Junior Faith, watching. Cindy had named her after Charlie's daughter, hoping to forge a brighter future. Faith Sr. had bonded with Grace and Junior Faith, even suggesting they call the younger one Junior, to avoid confusion. The nickname stuck. Cindy softened her tone. "We don't have to rush, Charlie." "No, you're right," Charlie replied. "I was getting too attached. It's better to deal with this now." He paused, looking thoughtful. "I promised the twins we'd go fishing today. I should get ready." He left, and Cindy put her head in her hands as she heard Faith Sr. angrily slamming things in the kitchen. Meanwhile, Charlie took the twins out fishing, and they had a good day, catching plenty. Faith Sr. invited everyone over for a fish fry the next day. When she noticed her father flinch at the mention of their old patio, Faith pulled him aside. "Dad, it's time to let the past go," she said gently. "Bring our new family tomorrow. You'll have plenty of new memories to make." Charlie sighed. "That's a nice thought, but they're leaving soon. Cindy needs someone closer to her age." Faith playfully smacked his arm. "You're being stubborn. They needed saving, and so did you. You've always wanted a big family, and now you're just turning it down." Charlie was taken aback. "You really think so?" "Yes," she said, grinning. "Now go clean those fish and bring everyone tomorrow. That includes Cindy. Tie her up if you have to." She winked. "I've got a surprise for you." As they drove home, Charlie reflected on the unexpected turn of events, listening to the excited chatter of the kids in the back seat. Once they were home, fed, and bathed, Cindy tucked Grace into bed and stepped outside to find Charlie sitting on the porch swing, lost in thought. "Can we talk?" she asked, sitting down next to him. "Devin was never a good husband or father. In just 6 months, you've shown my kids more love than he ever did. At first, I felt guilty for relying on your kindness, but then I realized not all men are the same. I love you, not as a father figure, but as a partner. I'm 40, and you're 59. The age difference doesn't matter to me. I want to be with you." Cindy rested her head against Charlie's neck, waiting anxiously for his response. After a brief pause, he asked, "If that's how you feel, then why did you push so hard to move out? Handing me that check really hurt." "I was hoping you'd ask me to stay, that you'd make the first move," she admitted. He frowned, and for a moment, Cindy feared she had misjudged everything. But then, Charlie leaned in and kissed her. "Good thing you're pretty, because you're definitely not the brightest," he teased with a grin. "Did it ever occur to you to just tell me? I've had feelings for a while, but I thought the age difference was an issue. Look at all the time we wasted," she sighed. As they kissed on the porch swing, the kitchen light flicked on. One of the kids was up for a snack. Cindy gave Charlie a quick kiss on the forehead before slipping inside. "This isn't over," she whispered, her eyes full of mischief. Charlie chuckled. "No, it sure isn't, little girl," he called after her, amused by her determination. The next morning, the kids were wide-eyed when Cindy casually sat on Charlie's lap and kissed him. Hope and Faith, understanding the shift, agreed to explain things to the younger twins later. "Kids, your mom and I need to run into town. Be good for Faith, or no fish fry tonight," Charlie warned with a playful wink. The children eagerly nodded, not wanting to miss out on the evening plans. At the dealership, Charlie turned to Cindy. "Pick out whatever new car you want for the family." "I thought we were getting a used one," Cindy said, surprised. "Used cars are for leaving. New cars are for staying. Got it?" Cindy threw her arms around him, overwhelmed with happiness. 90 minutes later, she pulled up to the house in a brand new van, grinning ear to ear. Faith spotted them and smiled, thinking to herself that her father could still be persuaded to do the right thing. The afternoon passed in blissful contentment. They ate, played, and relaxed as a family. Junior packed her bag for a sleepover, and the boys fell asleep after their baths. Meanwhile, Charlie and Cindy snuggled on the porch swing under the moonlight. "If it weren't for the kids," Charlie began, a mischievous glint in his eye. Cindy laughed. "With kids around, privacy is a lost cause. Unless you've got a better plan." Charlie glanced toward the barn, illuminated by the soft glow of the moon. "Come on," he said, grabbing an old quilt. Cindy giggled as they headed to the barn loft. "We're sneaking around from our kids now, not our parents." "Up the ladder," Charlie urged. In the loft, they made love under the stars, while, elsewhere, Rose felt a growing emptiness in her life. Though she had earned as much as Charlie over the years, it had always been different for him. For Charlie, his success was about taking care of others, while Rose's relationships had left her feeling hollow, always yearning for what she had lost. She had only seen Charlie 3 times in the last 4 years, once at a mutual friend's funeral. On that occasion, she had approached him with hope in her voice. "Remember the offer I made when we parted? Have you thought about it?" she asked quietly. Charlie looked at her with a pained expression. "I'm sorry, Rose. There's just too much baggage between us. Take care." She watched him walk away, her heart heavy with regret for everything that could never be. One night, Rose had a vivid dream of Charlie in a barn loft. On impulse, she drove to his property, only to overhear voices coming from the barn. "I'm not on the pill. I could get pregnant," Cindy said, her voice filled with warmth. "Then we'll name him Junior," Charlie replied with a laugh. Rose turned away, devastated, her dream shattered. 2 years later, she married Freddie, a wealthy but impotent man. When he proposed, Rose confessed everything about her past. "I'm impotent, Rose. We'll marry for companionship. You can have affairs as long as you keep them discreet," Freddie said with surprising nonchalance. Rose agreed, settling for a life of comfort, but without the love she had once longed for. When Rose passed away at 75, Faith inherited her estate. By that time, Charlie was married to the wealthiest woman in the state, and he joked, "Does this mean more kids?" They already had 5 children together. At their wedding, Faith had surprised Charlie with news that left him speechless. "Dad, you're going to be a grandfather in 7 months." Overcome with emotion, Charlie wept tears of joy, surrounded by the family he had always wanted. "Big wedding?" Ty, Faith's husband, asked. "Yes," Charlie said proudly. "And just so you know, her mother has been planning it since the sonogram." 5 weeks later, the church was packed as Charlie and Cindy renewed their vows, celebrating a life full of love and second chances. "Her mother and I do," Charlie declared proudly when asked who was giving the bride away. Later in the evening, Connie came rushing in, waving a strip of paper. "I'm 40 and pregnant," she exclaimed. Charlie kissed her, smiling warmly. "We'll love this baby just like the others." "Deal?" she asked, a little breathless. "Of course," Charlie replied, with a comforting sigh. "But now you have to marry me. Kids, are you ready for this old man to officially join the family?" "Yes," they cheered, their excitement filling the room. "Wait." Faith interrupted, grinning. "It's not official without a ring." Soon, Charlie took the girls to a jewelry store, where they helped him pick out a beautiful set. "Do you have matching bands for the girls?" Charlie asked the jeweler. "I'm marrying the whole family." The jeweler smiled, and the girls' cheers were so loud that they woke Grace, who had been napping in the store. A saleswoman helped Grace pick out a tiny ring, and she proudly admired it on her finger, refusing to take it off. Rings in hand, the family left the store and headed to a nearby steakhouse, completely unaware that the jeweler and his assistant had already spread the exciting news around town. At the restaurant, whispers of anticipation floated through the air as an elderly woman approached their table. "Is it true, Charlie?" she asked with a smile. "Yes, it's true," Charlie confirmed, proudly introducing his daughters. "Meet Faith, Hope, and little Grace. They might need some lessons. Do you have time?" After a brief chat, they left the restaurant, knowing they'd soon be the talk of the town. Back home, Connie was sitting on the porch, feigning indifference. "Just because you bought a ring doesn't mean I'll like it," she teased, eyeing the box playfully. But the moment she opened it, her breath caught. "Oh my, it's beautiful." Charlie knelt on one knee in front of her. "It's yours if you say yes." "Connie, will you marry me?" "Yes," she screamed, startling the horses. She jumped into his arms, tears streaming down her face. The girls immediately ran over to show off their own rings, bringing fresh tears to Connie's eyes. On their wedding day, Grace, dressed as the flower girl in a satin dress, threw petals down the aisle, while Faith proudly stood as Connie's matron of honor. Hope and Dooner looked stunning as they celebrated their family's union. After the ceremony, Grace tugged on Charlie's pants. "Kiss me too, Daddy," she said with a grin. Laughter filled the room as Charlie lifted her up, sharing a kiss with both his wife and daughter. Their honeymoon was a peaceful getaway by the beach, full of relaxation and fun activities. When they returned, they promised the kids a family trip before school started. A later sonogram revealed they were expecting a boy. Charlie beamed with pride, earning him the playful nickname Old Goat from Connie as they teased each other all the way home. When Charlie Jr. was born, healthy and strong, the family couldn't have been happier. As the years passed, Faith Sr. took great joy in introducing her family. "I'm Faith, this is my sister, also named Faith, my husband Charlie, my dad Charlie, and my brother Charlie. We're not too creative with names." Faith Sr. had 2 daughters, Rose and Constant, which helped avoid confusion. As Charlie watched his children grow up, Junior became especially close to him. Junior started working at the clinic before transitioning to the hardware business, eventually becoming the natural successor to Charlie's enterprises. Hope, meanwhile, took to farming, managing her own crops and livestock by the age of 17, while Grace, now 10, was a piano prodigy. A prestigious school was eager for her to attend, but she agreed only to summer visits for the time being. Charlie knew it was just a matter of time before she spread her wings and left home for good. In preparation for the future, Charlie set up trust funds for each of his children, with the condition that they had to graduate from college to access the money. If they didn't, they'd have to wait an additional 5 years, learning to live and work within their means. He apologized to Faith Sr. for using part of her inheritance for these funds, but she laughed it off. "Who am I to deny my siblings their share?" she said with a smile. "Besides, I'm sure my mother would cover any gaps." Sheriff Andy's downfall came swiftly after he lost his re-election bid. He turned to private investigation work, but a string of failed marriages and messy affairs left him disgraced. Ironically, his ex-wife Amanda later found happiness with a reliable older man named John. Charlie even attended their wedding, reflecting on how life can take such unexpected turns. Charlie passed away 2 months after celebrating his 79th birthday, just after witnessing his youngest son graduate. Connie followed him 15 years later. As for Rose, she chose to be cremated, with her ashes scattered into the ocean. Charlie's funeral was an enormous affair, so large it had to be held at the local football stadium. A staggering 800 people volunteered to carry the casket, forcing the family to hold a lottery to select the pallbearers. His hearse, drawn by Hope's marsh ponies, was led by Sheriff Carla, who had taken over law enforcement in the county. Unofficial records suggested that Charlie had personally funded nearly 1,000 college educations over the years. The ceremony brought together politicians, law enforcement officers, teachers, and countless professionals, all of whom credited their success to Charlie's generosity and mentorship. His darker side, known only to a select few, was never spoken of, and even if it had been, no one would have believed it. Meanwhile, in prison, Bobby Peterson's life took a bleak turn. He woke up on his first day with a pounding headache and a freshly broken nose, his welcome from fellow inmates. He had been sentenced to 12 years with no chance for parole, and an additional 18 months for animal cruelty. Things only got worse when he was transferred to Rockwell, a notorious maximum security facility. Within hours of his arrival, his nose was broken again. His new cellmate quickly set the rules. Bobby was now his property. 6 months in, Bobby's appearance had changed so dramatically that he had become a target for other inmates, who fought over him like a prize. By his 5th year, he had found a new protector who kept him safe enough to survive. Eventually, Bobby was released early for good behavior, though no one was waiting for him on the outside. Oddly enough, after all he had endured, he found a strange sense of contentment in his new life. He adopted a child, ironically named Charlie, and his days became focused on simple, peaceful moments, like comforting the teething child in his arms. When news of the elder Charlie's death reached him, it barely registered, his thoughts wrapped up in the new life he had created for himself.